Morning, everyone, depending on your time zone. Danielle Kimball, manager of the SAP Ariba Delivery Channel at Nitor. I'll be leading today's discussion on the SAP Ariba Cloud Integration Gateway, better known to everyone as CIG. I want to remind you that our Nitor webinars are always meant to be interactive. We will open the call up for questions at about 1:45. With that in mind, please feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A tool throughout the webinar. I'll be monitoring and posing your questions and comments when we open up for Q&A at the end. Also, this webinar will be recorded and posted on the Nitor website. All of us are coming live from our homes, so there may be some unavoidable background noises, which I'm sure everyone is used to during these times. So we have a lot of great information to share with you today. First, I'll introduce you to today's presenters and provide you with a high-level overview of Nitor's Ariba practice. Alex from Nitor will review the mechanics of the Cloud Integration Gateway. Murali from Puget Sound Energy is with us today and will share an overview of the company and his experience with the migration from CI9 to CIG. We will hear some lessons learned from the PSE CIG journey. And at the end, as I mentioned, we will open up for Q&A. We will try to reply to as many questions as possible. And if we don't get a chance to answer all of the questions during the webinar, we will follow up afterwards. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters for today's call. Nitor's own Alex Lopez. Alex has over 10 years of global technology and procurement operations experience throughout 10 different countries. Alex is an SAP Ariba integration professional with experience in analysis and design of SAP Ariba integrations with multiple ERPs. He has both technical and functional expertise in sourcing, contracts, supplier information and performance management, buying, invoices, and commerce automation, just to name a few. Alex had the pleasure of working on the CIG migration at Puget Sound Energy, which we will dive into during this webinar. Also, we are so thankful to have Murali Kara with Puget Sound Energy on our call today with us. Murali is a supply chain management professional with more than a decade of experience in implementing large-scale transformation programs by leveraging SAP modules of material management, extended warehouse management, and SAP Ariba. As we will discuss soon, he most recently led the transformation journey at Ariba at PSE from CI9 to CIG, and has been the cornerstone of their supply chain transformation over the last couple of years. Before joining PSE, he worked as a consultant where he successfully completed multiple end-to-end implementations in various capacities. And again, I am Danielle Kimball, and I manage the SAP Ariba delivery team at Nitor. So before we jump into the details of the Cloud Integration Gateway, I want to provide an overview of Nitor's SAP Ariba practice for those of you who may not know us. We've been in business since 2003, and we've been working with Ariba since day one. With Nitor's trained and certified consultants, we've deployed the Ariba solutions to well over 100 clients. With our experience over the last 17 years, we've been able to achieve a very special designation, which is noted front and center on the slide. The SAP Recognized Expertise in Cloud Procurement Solutions designation was offered to us by SAP. We are proud to say that we are the only partner in North America with this recognition and one of 3 partners globally. This was achieved by having trained and certified consultants across all Ariba modules, as well as having reference customers who are willing to talk about their deployment experience and the software deployed. We are excited to have earned this recognition and are proud of our Ariba practice. And although technology may have the spotlight in most of our projects, our consulting services listed on the right-hand side of the screen drive transformation across people, process, and technology. Our proven service experience, coupled with the trained and certified consultants that we have, has also enabled us to partner with Ariba over the past 15+ years. It's actually allowed us to collaborate with Ariba's product innovation team on new product development. CIG is just one example of how we've partnered up with Ariba to join the CIG Managed program when it was first released in 2017. We quickly became a preferred partner for CIG deployments. Since then, we have done multiple deployments and now have certified consultants, which brings us to today's webinar topic. Today's webinar focuses on the SAP Ariba CIG migration journey at Puget Sound Energy in 2019. So now I'll turn it over to Alex to talk about the Cloud Integration Gateway. Alex?
Thank you, Daniel. In the next section, I will explain basic concepts of CIG and how it works. Then Murli will explain from a customer perspective his experience with CIG and the migration process from CI9. Back in 2018, SAP invited Nitor as a preferred partner for the CIG program. During this time, we had early access to CIG and did one of the first implementations with our internal SAP system. We have been collaborating with SAP to make CIG experience better. Before we start with CIG and how it works, as you might know, CI9 and Business Suite add-on, or SAP is going to stop supporting CI9 and Business Suite add-on by the end of 2021. This means that after 2021, they will not support any bugs or any issues that you have with the system. Something else that happened last year is that all new features, all new programs that they are creating in order to make the CIG experience better are only available with CIG. So new programs like ERP initiated PRs, stock requests, export GRs, like if you create a GR in SAP and you want to send that to Ariba, that is not available. It is only available if you migrate to CIG. So there's new features that are coming, and then once you migrate, you will be able to access those new features. Let's talk a little bit about this SAP CIG vision and strategy. This is CIG today. So today, CIG is on top of SAP Cloud Platform, and it has integrations with SAP ECC, SAP S/4HANA On-Prem, and just recently S/4HANA Cloud Edition. It also integrates with suppliers. So this is how suppliers are integrating right now. So suppliers are connected to CIG, and then they can connect to different buyers. But the strategy is to use this technology to integrate with different cloud solutions. So SAP basically wants to use this in order to connect SAP Fieldglass, Concur, any cloud platform, any cloud solutions they have, and then also to connect this to non-SAP systems like Oracle, NetSuite, and Workday. Later, they want to also use this technology to connect to Internet of Things and third-party systems. So basically, they're creating this new platform that they want to use in order to integrate with different systems. It's not only for Ariba. This will be used in the future for different cloud solutions. Before talking about CIG migration, let's talk a little bit about how CI9 works. As you might already know, CI9 was basically a list of transports that you downloaded from Connect. So this is the screen from Ariba Connect. I don't know if you remember, but you just went to Connect, search for the solution that you wanted to install, and then you can download the transports. Then you needed to decide which transports you wanted to install. Same thing happened with PI mappings and with hotfixes, right? You went to Connect and then you downloaded the transports. You needed to decide which ones to install. This was not following SAP standards. I had a lot of problems with CI9 before, and in one of my projects in 1 month, I got more than 8 hotfixes. So that was causing a lot of problems in my implementation, and just in some cases the programs were not working, right? So there were a lot of problems with CI9. Then SAP realized that that solution was not working, and they decided to create something that was more global and then they can reuse for different cloud solutions. This is just a basic integration of CIG. As you can see, we have PI in the middle. PI is connected to Ariba app solutions, and then PI is also connected to Ariba network solutions. We have 2 different connections to 2 different Ariba systems, and then PI is connected back to SAP. In this case, we're using SAP Business Suite add-on and CI9, and all of that is connected to CIG using PI. So how things change with CIG? So this is the standard architecture with CIG. We'll see different options later on. But as you can see, SAP is connected directly to CIG. There isn't any PI in the middle. It is optional now. We'll see that in the next slide. But you can connect your SAP system directly to CIG. We don't have those transports that we had for CA9. Now SAP created an add-on that you can install directly into your SAP system. So basically you go to SAP Marketplace and you can download and install that add-on into your system. Then you can connect your outbound transactions directly to CIG. CIG will take care of all the mappings and transformations, and then CIG will send that information to the different Ariba solutions. For inbound, the same thing happens. CIG is connected to CIG. CIG will receive that information, and then it's going to send that back to your SAP system. And in order to make that connection secure, recommendation is to use SAP Cloud Connector, which is nothing more than a reverse proxy in order to make this connection secure. So using this reverse proxy, you can connect to SAP, create a direct connection, and make that connection secure. As mentioned before, in the future, CIG will also support non-SAP systems. This is actually a work in progress right now. So if you are using a non-SAP system, there isn't any out-of-the-box integration at this point, but this is work in progress, and SAP is working in order to make this happen. Just recently, S/4HANA Cloud Edition is supported. So if you're using S/4HANA Cloud, then you can also connect your SAP system into CIG. As mentioned before, recommended approach is to use Cloud Connector, because then we have a clean connection. We don't have any mappings, any transformations in the client side, and everything is happening on CIG. But SAP also knows that in some cases there's some policies that allows you to use or required to use SAP PI or HCI. That's why SAP also supports integrations with PI or HCI, but this is just a pass-through, okay? So even though you're using PI, you still need to use CIG. All transformations, everything is going to happen on CIG, and then PI is just a pass-through. So if you're sending a message back from Ariba into your SAP system, transformations will happen here, and then this is just a pass-through, meaning that you have to monitor PI, and you also have to monitor CIG. That's why the recommended approach is to have a clean connection without any additional layers, but this is also supported as a pass-through. So again, recommended approach is to use this architecture, but we will analyze and try to understand your landscape, your architecture, and decide which one's the best option for you. If you're using multiple ERPs, that's also supported. On CIG, there's something called custom routing. So let's say you're sending transactions from BNI, but depending on the company code, you want to send that to a different ERP. That is also supported. You just need to add a custom routing on CIG, and then it's basically a mapping between the company code that you're getting or a different field that you want to use, and then you decide which connection you want to use. So you can use connection to ERP1, ERP2, or ERP3, but everything is managed here on CIG. Again, if you're using SAP PI or if you want to use HCI, this will be only a pass-through. If you have any questions regarding this, you can add those questions in the Q&A section, and then we will be resolving all those questions at the end of the webinar. Something that I like a lot about CIG, and I don't know if you have seen this before, but this is kind of the things that I like the most, is that now CIG is part of SAP. You can feel that it is part of the SAP environment. So now it is part of S-Pro. If you go now to S-Pro, you will see a new section once you complete the installation of CIG, but you will see a new section and where you will see all the different options for the CIG connection and CIG installation. So that is something new, gives you a different experience. You can walk through all these different steps, and there's documentation for every different step. I don't know if you remember, but in the past, with CA9, you needed to go back to the documentation, try to see which one was the transaction for you to do the parameters, which one was the transaction for you to access the program, right? Now everything is in S-Pro. And something else that they created This is for BNI, but there's another one for commerce automations as well and for sourcing. They created a transaction. This is called interface setup, in where the only thing that you have to do is select which transactions you want to enable. And this will create a SOA manager configuration for you. This will create the IDOC configuration for you for commerce automation or sourcing. And basically, you don't have to worry about those configurations anymore because they created this really good report that will do that for you. So this is, I think this is my favorite transaction on CIG because this is actually doing a lot of the stuff that you were supposed to do before with CI9. Now you can just do it with a report. So benefits for a client to migrate to CIG. One of the most important things, and I think that I mentioned that before, is that now it feels like it is an SAP experience, right? It is aligned with the SAP strategy. So you can really feel that. I think that Murali will talk a little bit about that in his slides, but you can really feel that this is different. This is something that was created by SAP for SAP. It is an add-on now, so no transports from Connect anymore. It is an add-on. Same thing with hotfixes. You just need to update your add-on, or if there's any issue or bug, all of those will come as SAP notes. So if there's something that is not working, it will come as an SAP note. No more hotfixes as you had before. And also for upgrades, the experience is better, right? You just need to upgrade your current installation, and that will give you access to the new programs. So now I'll leave you with Murali so that he can explain his experience on the migration between CI9 and CIG from a customer perspective. Then we will talk a little bit more about the process, how we're running these programs, how we're running these migrations, the different steps that we follow, different material that we created in order to make this easier. But I'll leave you with Murali now so that he can explain from a customer perspective how he feels now that he has CIG. So Murali, back to you.
Thank you, Daniel and Alex. So Puget Sound Energy, or PSE in short, is a utility company which is based out of Seattle with headquarters in Bellevue. We serve approximately 1.1 million electric and more than 800,000 natural gas customers. Some of our largest customers include Fortune 500 companies like Boeing and Starbucks, to name a few. So coming to our Ariba journey on CI9, before we implemented Ariba, PSE utilized ECC, specifically the module for its procurement needs. Majority of our invoices came through mail or fax, and our accounts payable team manually entered them in the system. Especially for services, PSE followed a process where purchase orders were created in the system after we received invoice copies from the vendor. We used an active contract to indicate that the budget for the work has been approved, and later, when we received invoices, our users created release orders to match the invoices received. PSE started the execution of the Ariba project in early March 2017, and we went live in September of the same year with CI9 HF5. And the solutions which were implemented were commerce automation, catalogs, indirect procurement with BNI. So now elaborating on the architecture, we had to choose the path of mediated asynchronous connectivity using the direct connect option via PI. As a security team did not approve for an external system, Ariba in this case, to ping our systems directly. For indirect purchases, we transacted over BNI, which integrated with our backend ECC system through PI. For transactions, for all transactions, there is a job running in ECC, which when executed goes and fetches the data, which is basically in the form of files from Ariba BNI. PI receives these files and passes the information back to ECC. For the response back from ECC, ECC sends the file which passes through PI and is consumed by Ariba BNI. For direct procurement, what also called as commerce automation, where we directly collaborate from our backend ECC system with suppliers on the network. We used Business Suite add-on for this integration. SAP, in this case, generates XML messages, and PI acts as a pass-through to send the information over to the network. For inbound messages, there is a polling agent on PI which retrieves the information from AN and posts these back to SAP. Note over here that all transactions start in SAP, meaning that there is a batch job which is running in SAP, which when executed goes and fetches the data from Ariba. In our instance, for example, we fetch POs every 2 minutes and invoices every 15 minutes. Coming to the challenges we faced with CI9. Actually, there were quite a few of them, as you can see from the list. Services make up the major part of our indirect procurement here at PSC, which includes hourly contractors, and these POs more often than not have to be changed. We realized after discussing extensively with Ariba that PO change as it relates to services was not supported. It was not acceptable to our business to not have this functionality available out of the box. We also noticed that 30 to 40% of our invoices, which were coming from the network, were failing to post automatically into ECC. We actually spent a lot of time and effort analyzing these errors and realized that the root cause was some custom tax fields which were created on the requisition in Ariba, which leads to my next point. We did not implement best practices. For example, since we traditionally created purchase orders after receiving invoices from the vendor back in our ECC days, the tax code field was actually made mandatory at the PO level in ECC. Without due consideration, a decision was made to adopt a custom tax code field on the PR in Ariba. This led to many issues downstream, as the requisitioners were not aware if an item is taxable or non-taxable. Also, because of the architecture which we selected for integrating Ariba with our backend system, the system generated files which were picked up by the batch jobs to post transactions to SAP. When we ran into issues, more often than not, the starting point was to analyze the data in these files. This is a very cumbersome process, which after supporting for more than a year, I can confidently suggest that this should be a point enough for you to change your architecture. The other supporting points were the fact that CI9 had to be replaced before 31st of December 2021, as it would be expiring by that time, as announced by SAP. It was also not easy to keep up pace with the frequency of hotfixes updates being released by Ariba. The updates were being released at a breakneck pace, and there was no way to follow due diligence, which is defined in our organization, before upgrading our hotfixes in our system. This is a point which was also briefly touched by Alex. Finally, the responses on the SRs was not to our satisfaction. The solutions, if at all provided, were delayed and in most cases did not solve the problem at hand. Looking in hindsight, this to an extent can be attributed again to the architecture and how cumbersome it was to analyze any issues. Next slide, please. As mentioned in the previous slide, we faced many challenges with CI9. Some were self-inflicted, whereas others were product capability related. Some major drivers to take the leap of faith to migrate to CIG were the fact that we wanted to adopt best practices to ensure that the flow of documents was without any manual intervention. Analysis of invoice failures also led to a conclusion that some of the customizations which we implemented as part of the initial implementation might be causing them. We also worked with Ariba and concluded that changes on service purchase orders was actually supported out of the box with CIG. Additionally, we also came up with answers to mitigate the risks which were posed by our IT security on direct connectivity. And moving to direct connectivity would also lead to better user experience and hence better user adoption. So now we come to the migration of CI9 from CI9 to CIG. So as you can see, the overall objective of the project was to accomplish more than just upgrading from CI9 to CIG. As depicted in the diagram over here, the overall timeline for the project was 48 weeks, and we adopted agile methodology to accomplish the tasks. Coming solely to the upgrade to CIG, we divided this into two halves. We, as part of the first migration, we migrated our master data from CI9 to CIG, which took us 7 weeks from build to cut over into production. You can see that this was from week 21 in the diagram to week 27. Please note that we also accomplished other aspects of the project during this timeline, along with migrating master data from CI9 to CIG. For the transactional data, the plan was to execute the migration starting again from build to cutover in 9 weeks. But in reality, it took us 13 weeks to accomplish this task. Next slide, please. After upgrading from CI9 to CIG, our architecture looked like this. As you can notice, our architecture for commerce automation remained the same, but you can notice the change of integration between BNI and ECC. When we started the migration of master data, we initially migrated from CI9 hotfix 5 to CIG SP5. In the later slides, I will cover why we had to upgrade from CIG SP5 to CIG SP7 midway of migrating our transactional data. We already had SAP Cloud Connector installed on-prem, as this was done as part of SuccessFactors implementation before we started the upgrade from CI9 to CIG. Depending on your architecture, you might be required to install this component. SAP provides alternate integration methodologies, but we chose to go with Cloud Connector as we wanted to have, as we did not want to have a middleware component, and also we wanted to utilize already existing hardware and follow best practices. In this architecture, we have CIG and our instance of Ariba on the cloud. When a transaction is posted in BNI, there is a web service call from BNI to CIG. Now, CIG applies any applicable mapping and sends the information through Cloud Connector to consume an RFC call in SAP. SAP in turn then sends out outbound messages or responses directly to CIG through web services, which in turn CIG transmits them over to Ariba. So this is we also plan on migrating our business suite add-on from Business Suite add-on to CIG in the second part of this year. This is the diagram this would be the architecture once we complete that migration. The intention is not to utilize PI anymore for Ariba integration, and all outbound and inbound messages will come to CIG and SOA Manager as either IDOCs or proxies. As I mentioned in the previous slides, we are currently on CIG SP7. From a resources point of view, we had one basis resource who helped us with the installation and setting up of connectivity. He was also responsible for working with the network team to resolve any firewall related issues. We also had one resource from security helping us with the maintenance of roles and working with, again, basis to enable connectivity. The resources from security and basis are not required to be available 100% and are only required to execute specific tasks. We also had one ABAP resource who executed the migration of code and customizations. I would say that this resource spent around 60 to 70% of the time on the project. From a CIG perspective, I led the effort as a functional resource and spent 100% of time on the project during this phase. Coming to best practices and takeaways. I really cannot stress the importance of working alongside the right partner on the migration. We were lucky to have NITAR partners who brought immense value to the table, and there were multiple instances during the project where we were able to provide critical direction to Ariba on the next steps to be executed. This helped in saving a lot of time on the project, especially when we were adopting agile methodology. Secondly, understand your business requirements and security protocols of your organization to select the right architecture. Discuss and get approvals from IT security about the architecture you intend to implement. This was a lesson we learned from our initial implementation of Ariba with CI9, and something which helped us immensely during the implementation of CIG. Referencing again the first point, we did come across product shortcomings when migrating transactional data. We engaged SAP Max Attention and were able to get on frequent calls with SAP engineers to communicate these issues. As you can see, the list of very high incidents, OSS incidents, which we raised with SAP. One among them, which I would like to call out, is the OSS incident 10734, shown in the screenshot, where the resolution was to upgrade from CIG SP5 to CIG SP7. Next slide, please. Finally, but not the least, Ariba has introduced the Go Live button, which I have highlighted over there, for going live with CIG for transactional data. And this is something which they have implemented from CIG SP6. As you can see, this is a screenshot from when we went live a few weeks ago. Ensure you have created a checklist of all the prerequisites and you have checked them all. You cannot literally go live until and unless the Go Live button appears for you. That would be all from my end. Alex, over to you.
Thank you very much, Murali. You can also see there's a lot of questions in the chat. If you have more questions, you can just add them to the chat or the Q&A section, and we will be resolving all those questions at the end. Before we move to that section, I want to talk a little bit about the migration process and how we're doing that on NITAR, okay? So next slide. So we have learned that when migrating from CA9 to CIG, there's some activities that you have to perform. So we divided these in 3 different activities: pre-migration activities, migration activities, and post-migration activities. Pre-migration activities refers to all these activities needed before we start a project. What we're doing in our projects is that we're analyzing your current installation first, so that we can decide how big the implementation will be, how many customizations you have. If you have customizations on PI, then we have to decide if we need to migrate that to CIG or if we need to migrate that to SAP, depending on the type of customization, right? If it's only a mapping, then it will be done in SAP. But if it's something more complex, then we'll have to migrate that to SAP. As you remember, we don't have PI anymore, like for complex integration. We will have to use SAP or CIG, so we have to define that. So we create a matrix of all the different customizations you have, and then we define a strategy for every custom work. In some cases, and in some projects like PSC, migration to CIG was only one of the activities that we were performing. But we also analyzed the whole implementation that they had, and we also recommend best practices. So it was not only a technical implementation, it was also a functional implementation, as we did some changes in Ariba as well for processes and some custom fields that were not needed. We migrated that to a standard. So there were some different things that we did. All of that we will define on pre-migration activities so that we can decide which one's the best path for you, right? We also decide if we're going to use Cloud Connector or if you guys need to use HCI and PI. Our recommendation is always to use SAP Cloud Connector, but we have to understand your architecture first, your landscape, and then decide which one's the path that we will move forward with. After all of that is decided, then we will move forward to migration activities. This is basically installation and configuration of CIG, migration of your current data, migration of your current customizations. And in order to expedite that process, we have created some NETOR rapid deployment guides, right? So basically, this is a step-by-step on which configurations or which steps you have to perform in SAP in order to do this migration, right? I'll show you a screenshot later, but we created this so that we can make this faster, right? We can make this better as well. It also includes some tips and recommendations, some common errors that we have seen, so that you guys can make this deployment faster. After all of that's done and through the migration process, right, this is like high-level steps that we have to perform. We have installations and configurations on SAP, but then we also have configurations and installations on CIG, right? On the CIG side, we have to enable the connection so that we can connect to SAP, so that we can connect to Ariba. If there's any mapping, you have to do the mappings on CIG. And once that's done, then we can move to the next phase, which is post-migration activities, which is testing, cutover, and going live, right? As mentioned before, we created some rapid deployment solution guides. This is something that we created internally so that we can make this migration faster. So this is basically a step-by-step of what you have to do on CIG, which features and parameters you have to enable in Ariba in order to enable CIG, right? We also make reference or can give you reference to different SRs that we have used in the past in order to make that happen. And then we also have screenshots on SAP. So in SAP, you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to enable your integration, right? So we have seen this working, and it will expedite your deployment, right? So basically, that's the process that we follow. So just once again, we first analyze your current system. Depending on how big and how many solutions you have, it can take between 2 to 4 weeks, right? Depending on how big your implementation is. And then we can tell you exactly how much time this is going to take. And then if you want to do different things, like if you want to also do or migrate some of your processes in Ariba, then we can also assess that as well. So I think that that will be all regarding our migration process. I'm going to give it back to Danielle so that we can start with a Q&A session and we can answer the questions that you have. So once again, thank you very much. And Danielle, back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Murali and Alex. As Alex said, we'll open up for Q&A now. There's lots of questions that came in, so I will try to get to all of them. First one is, are there any CIG specific APIs for data extraction?
So we're not using APIs. I think that's an important question. So Ariba they also have APIs that you can use in order to extend your system, right? So if you go to developers.ariba.com, then it will give you access to different APIs that you can use in order to create extensions. Nitor has created some extensions that we'll be releasing next month to create different extensions and different integrations into Ariba, but that's a different process. When you have CIG, basically you have new messages that will connect Ariba into CIG, and then CIG is sending that information back to SAP. The way that works is that CIG is either sending IDOCs or is sending proxy messages, depending on the transaction. So for example, if you're using commerce automation, right? And if you want to create an invoice in SAP, then that's going to be an IDOC. But if you're using BNI, then it's going to be a proxy for the invoice integration. So it depends, but it uses SAP technology. That's how CIG connects back to SAP.
Okay. Next question, is the SAP add-on as well as Cloud Connector needed without PI, or can we have an add-on without Cloud Connector? What did you mean by commerce automation? That's
okay. So let me answer the first question first. So Cloud Connector, and I don't know if I can just go back one slide. That will make it easier. Okay, this one right here. So Cloud Connector is just a reverse proxy, right? It is not a middleware. It's just a reverse proxy that allows a secure connection between SAP and CIG. Basically, it only allows the connection. It creates a secure tunnel, right? All mappings, all transformations are happening here. But you do need the add-on. So the add-on is all the programs that you need in order to make that integration happen. And this is just a reverse proxy. When you have PI, let me go back to the next slide. Not this one, this one. When you have PI, this is just probably that was the confusion. This is just a diagram that shows the different options, right? It's not that you have to have all of them. This one only shows the different options. When you have PI, then you will not have this. You will not have HCI. You only have PI, right, in the middle. So PI will control the connections between CIG and SAP, but this is just a pass-through, right? There's no mappings on PI. There's no transformations on PI. Everything is going to happen in CIG. So basically, this will be just an additional layer that you're using in order to create that connection, right, or make that connection secure. So recommendation is always to use Cloud Connector, but you can still use PI or HCI. So this is just the different options that you have. It's not that you have to do all of them. I don't know if that answered the question. And second part of the question was, yes?
Yeah, you want me to take that, Alex? The second part of the question?
Yeah, if you can answer that, that'll be great. Thanks, Morales.
Sure. So commerce automation is where you directly integrate with your backend ECC system with suppliers on the network. So there is no BNI which comes into the picture. So there, in our case, especially with PSE, we create purchase orders which get transmitted over to the network directly. And if the supplier chooses to transact directly from the network, they send across messages. So there's basically no BNI which comes into the picture. That's what we mean by commerce automation.
Okay. Next question. If you want to migrate to CIG but are on a previous version other than CI9, can we still do the migration?
Yes, you can still do the migration. You don't have to have CI9. You can go directly to CIG. The only thing that happens is that if you're in a CI6 or CI7 version, right, probably you have a lot of custom work. So we have to analyze first and understand how many custom work you have so that then we can decide what's going to be that migration strategy. All of the out-of-the-box steps will be the same, and where you establish connection, you do the configurations in order to enable CIG on your SAP system and in Ariba. But then we have to see how many custom work you have, and then how we're going to migrate that custom work into CIG. So yes, you can do it, but we have to analyze and see all the custom work that will be needed and how or what's going to be the strategy in order to migrate that into the CIG implementation.
So this leads us to the next question. How do you migrate the customized maps in our SAP PIPO that uses CI9 adapter to CIG?
Can you repeat the question, please, Daniel?
Sure. How do you migrate the customized maps from SAP PI?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. So it depends on the mapping, right? And as I was saying, we have to define strategy. If it's just a mapping between one field and another field, then you can do that on CIG, right? On CIG, there's a mapping section and where you can map different fields. You can map custom fields, you can map fields to different sections. There's some functions that you can use like substrings, or if you want to change the data type, you can also do that. So you can do some of those things in Ariba, but if it's something complex, like I remember with CI9 and commerce automation, there's multiple calls between PI and SAP, right? Because the standard IDOC is not sending all the information that Ariba needs, like accounting, for example. So there's multiple calls between PI and ECC. So what Ariba did is that they created a new IDOC, which has more sections with all the information that we need for Ariba. So it just depends. We're probably not going to do those customizations in where PI is calling multiple systems, but now they enable different exits as well in SAP that you can use in order to enhance that message. And then if a mapping is needed in CIG as well, then you can do the mappings on CIG. So just to keep it short and answer your question, we have to analyze the mapping. The adapter is not going to be needed anymore. And then you have to decide if we're going to do the mappings in CIG or if it is not possible to be done in CIG and it will require some custom work on SAP. Okay, so I think that will be the answer.
Okay. Morale, this one sounds like it's for you. Now that you're live with CIG, do you see less errors and minimal management in your integration monitoring?
Yes, surely. I think there has been a drastic improvement in the error rate. We have actually some tangible numbers which we have reported out. As I was stating, we had a huge failure on invoices. As I mentioned, 30 to 40% of our invoices were failing, and we have seen just since we went live until a week ago that there was an improvement of 28% on the invoices being getting posted manually. Getting posted automatically from Ariba BNI to SAP. So yes, overall there has been a very drastic improvement, and also even in cases where we come across any errors, analyzing and getting to the root cause has become much easier, and hence fixing those errors, the time required to fix those has also shortened.
Great, thank you. Next one is 48-week timeline standard for all migrations, or can be less or more?
It can be much more. Yeah, I think I can answer that, Morale.
Sure.
That can be much more less. So at PSC, we didn't only do migration to CIG, right? There was like different processes that we're performing as well. Not only the migration, changes on Ariba, migrating standards in Ariba as well. There were some custom fields that we're using that were not needed. So it was different implementation, right? If we're talking only about migration, based on our different projects and estimation, just a standard migration or a standard implementation without the migration, right? Shouldn't take more than 6 to 8 weeks, right? Just the standard, right? Then the assessment that I was talking at the beginning, right? That's where we will define how big the implementation is, right? Because we have to understand how many customizations you have, and then define a strategy for every customization. So it will depend on how many custom work you have, but just the standard, just enabling CIG standard without any custom work, it shouldn't take more than 6 to 8 weeks. But then it depends on how many mappings, how many custom work you have. That's where we will define how big the implementation is. And something good about CIG, I don't know if I mentioned that before, but is that now we only have one single connection, right? So once you connect it, right, and then if you have multiple Ariba solutions, let's say you have E&I, you have commerce automation, you have sourcing and contract integration as well, you don't have to do this connection again, right? The connection is being done once, and then you can just reuse that connection for the different Ariba solutions. So that will make that process simpler, right? You just have to configure different messages, but you don't have to establish connection again. Connection is only one time, so that will make it faster too. Yes.
I would like to just add to what Alex mentioned, right? It's absolutely critical that you go through an assessment to understand what kind of customizations you have. But something as a customer, from a customer point of view, we have seen that there might, again, depending upon what processes you have implemented, that there might be some shortcomings. Master data, I would just like to state that was a very smooth journey. And from a transactional, when we were trying to migrate our transactional data over, there were some shortcomings which we came across. So when we come across shortcomings, we have to rely either on SAP or Ariba. So that interaction can lead to some delays. So take that into consideration when you plan for timelines, right? Put some buffer so that you can allow either SAP or Ariba to come back with some solutions. Again, this all depends upon your processes and how confident you feel. If these processes, if you have no customizations in your previous version and everything was working smooth, probably you will not face any issues. So that is something which I just wanted to add from a customer perspective.
Okay, Morel, we have another question for you. This is regarding project management and functional resources. How is the project managed and testing completed?
So from a project management perspective, right, we had a project manager who was managing the overall project. As has been mentioned earlier, the overall scope of the project was much larger than just the migration. So from a testing perspective, I had one more resource, a functional resource, who was actually responsible for working with the test lead to create the scripts. There was support from Nitor, and they were very detailed scenarios, especially when we came to transactional data, right? We created some detailed testing scenarios, and as you can see from the 5 very high critical incidents which we logged with SAP, that we did a really good job of testing the various kind of scenarios, right? This is something which we learned from the initial implementation, that testing was not as extensive as we would have really liked. So in the previous implementation or the initial implementation with CI9, we actually faced a lot of issues once we actually migrated to Ariba in our production realm. We wanted to ensure that we do not run into those kind of issues, and we tested very extensively when we came across issues which were not in either R or Nitor's realm to actually resolve. We worked with both SAP and Ariba to ensure that they provided fixes on a timely fashion, and we were able to go live, although not within the stipulated 9-week timeline, but I believe our leadership was quite satisfied with the timeline we were able to finally execute. Thank you, Danielle.
You're welcome. Another one. We have a lot of questions. What was the reason PAC did not use CIG for commerce auto integration?
It was actually a quite simple decision why we went with replacing CI9 with CIG and did not opt for it in the commerce automation piece of it. First thing was the majority of our issues when we went live with Ariba were actually with CI9 or with our indirect procurement, right? Commerce automation was relatively much more stable and had much lesser issues. Secondly, we didn't do a big bang, right? We wanted to see we were skeptical and we were trying to be optimistic at the same time. Did not want to do a big bang. So these were basically the two reasons why we did not try to transform from Business Suite add-on to CIG for commerce automation. But as I also mentioned, that is the plan for the second half of this year, and we actually intend to replace Business Suite add-on with CIG for our commerce automation also.
Okay. Next, did you use any tools for testing and comparing current CI9 files with migrated CIG files?
I don't believe we use any tool for that. So the files will be the same, right? So the only testing that was done was to compare the data, just to make sure that we didn't miss anything, right? There's a transaction that will actually migrate all the configurations that you have on TBAR table. I don't know if you remember that table TBAR. So that will migrate. I think it's right here. I want to show you that option too. So there's an option to do migrations, right? So one of those options is going to migrate all your TBAR parameters from CA9 to CIG. And that will take care of all the mappings, right? All the filters, sorry, that you added on TBAR. So basically the files are the same method we use. So CIG generating the CSV files and then pushing that into CIG. SAP generating the files and pushing that into CIG. So we just compared the two files just to make sure that the data was the same, but no additional tool was used. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have enough time for two more. Do we necessarily need GIC, or maybe to implement, probably CIG, to implement Ariba if we already run HCI?
Yes. So CIG is a middleware in the cloud that SAP created, right? So right here. So CIG is right here. CIG will take care of all the mappings that the SAP add-on is sending. So SAP add-on is sending a transaction, and then CIG will take care of all the mappings. There's a standard mapping that will be performed here, right? That you don't have access to. Those are standard mappings. You can create custom mappings on top of that, but all the mappings and transformations happen here. If you're using HCI, and then with CIG, that's only a pass-through. So it will be this one right here. So it's only a pass-through. You're sending the messages, then HCI will send that to CIG. But all the mappings and transformations will happen here. Because the way they created this is that the add-on will create a program or a transaction that CIG will understand, and then CIG will transform into the message that Ariba needs, right? But this will be only a pass-through. Okay.
Okay, and the last question we have time for is, this work seems pretty complex. Can this work be done remotely?
Yes, actually we just recently completed a migration remotely with different clients, and everything was performed 100% remotely. We were sharing screen, we were using Microsoft Teams actually in order to share documentation, recording all the sessions, and it worked really, really good actually. We went live last Sunday, and they are live right now. So yes, it can be done remotely.
Great. Okay, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. We know there are a lot of questions that were not answered. We will answer them offline and get back to everyone. So a big thank you to Murali for joining us today, and thank you, Alex, for sharing your CIG knowledge with everyone. If you are interested in learning more or having Nitor assess what your CIG migration might look like, please log on to our website at nitorpartners.com, or email us at info@netourpartners.com. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.